Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Carl Brook, and I'm the Director of International Programs at the Environmental Law Institute. I'm also the founding president of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association. Thank you for joining us today for our session on new tools for monitoring and evaluation of environmental peacebuilding. We'll begin with a couple of brief presentations on two new resources that we'll be focusing on today. And then I'll moderate a couple round-robin panel discussion sessions. We'll open up the floor to questions from the audience. You're invited to submit your questions through the Zoom's Q&A at the bottom there. It's my pleasure to introduce today's panelists. Dr. Amanda Wollmer is the co-chair of the Monitoring and Evaluation Interest Group of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association, as well as a consultant with Universalia's Environment, Security, and Conflict Transformation, or ENSECT practice. In these roles, Amanda supports international development and environmental conservation organizations in developing effective and accessible MEL frameworks that consider the interconnectedness of the environment, conflict, climate, and peace. Amanda also conducts evaluations, including recent evaluations of the Global Center on Adaptation's Africa Work Program and the Global Climate Fund's investments in African states. Our second speaker, Dr. Tracy Hart, holds two concurrent roles: Global Lead for Environmental Risk Management, ERM, and Environmental and Social Framework, ESF, as well as Global Lead for Fragile and Conflict States, FCS, both for the Environment, Natural Resources, and Blue Economy global practice at the World Bank. In her global lead role for FCS, Tracy engages in thought leadership and how situations of fragility and conflict at subnational, national, and regional levels influence management of natural resource assets and vice versa. Tracy also focuses on how to incorporate security risk management into development projects at the design and implementation phases. Her career has spanned 30 years in 75 countries with substantial experience in Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. Dr. Geeta Batra is the Chief Evaluator and Deputy Director for Evaluation at the Independent Evaluation Office of the Global Environment Facility. She has over 25 years of experience in international development, including 15 years of experience in program evaluation. After spending 2 years at American Express in New York, where she was the Senior Manager of Risk, Geeta joined the World Bank, serving as Chief Evaluator and Manager for Country and Corporate Thematic Evaluations as Independent Evaluation Group. In 2015, she joined the Independent Evaluation Office of the GEF as Chief Evaluator and Deputy Director. In her role, she manages a team of evaluation professionals and provides oversight on the design, implementation, and quality of evaluations. Geeta has co-authored a number of books and articles and managed over 100 evaluations. Dr. Daniel Abrams is the Senior Climate Security Advisor in the Bureau of Conflict Prevention and Stabilization of the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID. Daniel provides technical guidance for programmatic interventions as well as agency and interagency policy efforts. His research focused on the ways in which institutions approach the joint challenges of climate change, conflict, and disasters. He has conducted research in Uganda, Haiti, Kenya, Zambia, and the United States on topics ranging from the barriers to accessing climate security risks with development policy to individual level perceptions of flood risk. And now, before diving into the details of the tools, I want to provide a little background for the development of one of the resources we have here. For the past 2 years, Amanda and I have led a team in developing a toolkit on monitoring and evaluation of environmental peacebuilding with a support grant from the U.S. Institute of Peace. This toolkit serves as an evidence-based framework to inform how practitioners monitor, evaluate, and learn from interventions at the intersection of
Sure.
environment, conflict, and peace.
Yeah, there's 2 pineapple ones.
And I should note that we're using the term environmental peace building as a shorthand to cover a range of projects that and projects and programs that are at the intersection of environment, conflict, and peace. At the same time, the World Bank will also be sharing their roadmap, which provides guidance to help practitioners select a theory of change and develop a corresponding set of indicators. Environmental peace building is a new field. As such, there are a range of definitions. For purposes of the toolkit, environmental peace building may be defined as a meta framework comprising multiple approaches and pathways by which the management of environmental issues is integrated in and can support conflict prevention, mitigation, resolution, and recovery. And I should note that environmental peace building includes both the environmental dimensions of peace building and the peace and security dimensions of sustainable development, natural resource management, environmental conservation, and climate change. So the arrow goes both ways, if you will. One of the challenges for the project was trying to capture the diversity and interventions, theories of change, and perspectives on environmental peace building. And what we initially identified more than 30 different theories of change, and we've been working with the World Bank to try to structure that into a more accessible series of categories. And I expect that Tracy will share current thinking on that. One of the challenges in conducting, well, there are actually many challenges in conducting M&E for environmental peace building. One of the big challenges is that there's limited practice on actual environmental peace building M&E. There's M&E for environmental programming, M&E for climate change, M&E for peace building, M&E for dispute resolution, but there's so far a limited base of experience. So we've drawn upon a wide range of practice and scholarship in developing this toolkit. One of the challenges in having difficulties with M&E is that it's hard to show impacts. And if you can't show impacts, it's very hard to show that this should be funded. So one of the goals in developing this is to support increased programming so that we can learn from environmental peace building interventions and see what's working, see what should be scaled up, and see what should be left as learning. There are a few specific challenges that I think are worth highlighting. One is there are different objectives and metrics that are traditionally used in environmental programming that are different from those used for peace building programming. Second, it can be very challenging to connect these metrics. How do we know that the changes that we observe in the environment are linked causally to changes that we may observe in peace or conflict? It may be that, yes, the environment improved and peace improved, but how do we know that the improvements in peace were due to entirely separate factors, or they were due to the efforts that we had in this particular environmental sphere? Another challenge that we saw is that theories of change tend to be implied or unarticulated, they're underdeveloped, they may be combined with other theories of change implicitly. And this is one of the areas that makes environmental peace building M&E different, because the theories of change for environmental peace building are much less developed. We have evidence of these theories of change, but we haven't been doing environmental peace building as long, so the nuance of when things work, under what circumstances, is much less robust. And so one of the challenges we need is to test and to learn from the different experiences so we can then feed that back into future design and programming. Another challenge are the long time horizons that for peace building, for environmental governance, and for environmental peace building, often it takes years, if not decades, to see not only if an intervention really was successful, but also the full range of impacts. Next, though, Amanda is going to provide an overview of the new toolkit on monitoring and evaluation of environmental peace building, and how it's intended to be used. Then we will hear from Tracy, who will talk about the roadmap the World Bank has developed and is currently pilot testing. We'll then turn to our commentators before opening the floor up for discussion. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A. Over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Carl. So as Carl mentioned, there are a number of challenges and gaps in the practice of monitoring and evaluation for environmental peace building. And we have designed a toolkit that is intended to be a guidance document to help practitioners think through how to design, from the design all the way through implementation of environmental peace building projects, what they need to consider, starting with those theories of change that Carl mentioned in the design and going all the way through implementation and learning. So hopefully you can see my screen. Our toolkit has 4 chapters in addition to some other information providing background on environmental peace building and M&E, but 4 main chapters that go from design to monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And this slide just highlights some of the key important items that are in each chapter. The design chapter starts with context analysis and conflict analysis. Evaluation includes assessing the context in which an environmental peace building project or intervention will take place. And so how do you do that and ensure that you have the information that you need to then go about creating theories of change, explicit theories of change that include the assumptions that are behind that theories of change that you can then test through implementation. And we also discuss in the design chapter developing the full approach to monitoring, evaluation, and learning, noting that when you do this from the start of a project or intervention, you're more likely to do monitoring and evaluation learning successfully because you've planned for it. We then have a monitoring chapter that goes through more of the ins and outs, the nitty-gritty pieces of doing monitoring, specifically monitoring as an early warning for environmental peace building interventions, looking at unintended consequences, etc. And then we have an evaluation chapter that discusses the specific challenges to evaluating environmental peace building, as well as innovative approaches in evaluation and programmatic evaluations, which are really important for environmental peace building work. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the final chapter is for learning. So how do you develop a strong learning plan and implement that plan so that you can support inclusive and actionable learnings throughout the environmental peace building intervention and address any challenges that come up through that learning. And it's a focus on adaptive management, making sure that the monitoring and evaluation information is actually used throughout the intervention cycle. And then underlying all of this, we have some specific pieces that flow through all of these chapters. The first being conflict sensitivity. There's been a lot of great conversation at this conference about conflict sensitivity and integration. And throughout the toolkit, we discuss how to be conflict sensitive in the design, monitoring, evaluation, and learning process. We also talk about participation and inclusion. Seeing participation and inclusion is really important to successful environmental peace building work, but also to successful monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So how do you build that in? What steps can you take to ensure that there's expanded participation, that you're really thinking through inclusion of the various different stakeholder groups? And then another piece is gender. We discuss different ways to incorporate gender in the design, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, things to think about, consideration. So those 3 themes flow throughout the entire toolkit. So starting with the design chapter, some key ideas that we include in this chapter are about theories of change. So making sure that they're explicit. As Carl mentioned, we've done a lot of consultations and research as part of developing this toolkit. And we've found that a lot of environmental peace building work isn't necessarily very explicit about the theories of change that it incorporates. And there's been some great discussion during this conference on that, about what theories of change we still need to make explicit and gather evidence for. So as Carl mentioned too, one of the key challenges with environmental peace building is that there are interactions between environment, natural resource management, and climate on the one hand, and conflict and peace building on the other. So do environmental peace building interventions have these theories of change that show how those pieces interweave and connect? And then really important, and another theme that I've heard come up in this conference quite a bit is being very explicit and capturing assumptions and risks that are built into your theories of change so that you can explore them as the intervention happens, as the context evolves, and make sure that you're monitoring and evaluating not just what you're doing, but what your assumptions are, what risks are emerging from that context. The design chapter also includes information on developing qualitative and quantitative indicators, what you need to consider, the importance of having both, the importance of triangulation in those. You know, if you have one set of data that tells you what's happening, it's really important to understand the why, and not only the why in an objective sense, but how people are seeing an environmental peace building intervention take place and capturing all of that. So that's some of the important points that are coming out for us in the design chapter. In the monitoring chapter, again, we focus a lot on conflict sensitivity. So what does that mean for gathering, analyzing, storing, and sharing monitoring data? We found that in environmental peace building contexts, much like peace building contexts more generally, there's a lot of challenges in gathering monitoring data due to insecure contexts, due to the threat of reprisal for people that provide information, etc. But also that when you store or share that information, you know, balancing transparency and being conflict sensitive and wishing to not cause additional harm are really important considerations. So the monitoring chapter walks you through how to do some of this or how to think about it in developing your monitoring plan and process. We also talk about establishing baselines that make sense, you know, in an ever-changing, dynamic, fluid context. When you take a baseline, really affects how you perceive the intervention to be happening over time. And then, of course, there's this idea of monitoring for unintended consequences and also the context. So we don't just stick to the activities, outputs, and outcomes in a theory of change, but what else is happening in that context that could be affecting the work that's happening. Then we have evaluation. So one important aspect is to revisit conflict and context analyses in doing evaluations. How have those changed over time? What does that mean now for the context in which you're doing an evaluation? We talk a lot as well about participatory and inclusive evaluations and how the act of doing an evaluation and the way in which you do it can support environmental peace building objectives. There are a lot of sessions here at this conference about social cohesion, for example, and we think through how being participatory and inclusive can support some of those goals and building trust between groups. And that's possible in the way that you do evaluations and in perhaps less traditional types of evaluations that are really empowering of different stakeholder groups. And then one important piece is programmatic evaluations. I've heard a lot in the last few days about how we need to think systematically. We can't just look at one particular intervention, but we need to consider how it might be interacting with other work that's happening in the same space, other changes that are taking place in the context, you know, changes in institutions, governance structures, natural environmental changes related to climate change. And we found in our conversations and our research that a focus on programmatic evaluations that look at an entire cohort or grouping of projects can be really useful in this context for seeing how things change over time and how different aspects of different interventions affect one another. And then the final chapter is on learning. So one of the challenges is balancing short and long timelines. You know, short in terms of things can change very quickly, and long in terms of change, real change in addressing root causes of conflict or addressing the root causes of environmental degradation, et cetera, can take a long time. And so how do we build learning plans and processes that balance that by getting the information that we need quickly for adaptive management in the face of quick changes to the context, but also that allow us to understand how things are taking a long time to change. And that, something that seems like a failure in the short term isn't really when you consider what else is happening and the long time horizons. And then finally, being very explicit in crafting learning plans, making sure that we have those in advance, so that we're not collecting a bunch of data, doing some evaluations, having a lot of monitoring information at our fingertips, but not doing much with it that helps our intervention. And basing some of those learning plans on responding to stakeholder needs. There was a great panelist this morning in the plenary who talked about the different ways that they're reporting out information to different kind of stakeholders based on what they care about, what accessibility challenges they might have, language, reporting in language that makes sense to them. And all of this is incorporated into our learning chapter as well to help people think through these. And that's all of our chapters. I'll pass it back to you, Carl.
Thank you, Amanda. And turn it to Tracy to share the World Bank's roadmap that you are developing and pilot testing.
Thank you. So first, let me acknowledge Ella, who's assisting me to present the slides here. So I wanted to give you an introduction to the work that we're doing here at the World Bank with respect to environmental peace building. We have a recent publication out called Defueling Conflict, which really looks at environmental and natural resource management pathways to peace. And so now we're extending that work, kind of looking at how we measure defueling conflict. Next. So I just wanted to kind of define what we're doing, because environmental peace building includes a lot within its definition. And I've listed here environmental causes of conflict, targeting of the environment during armed conflict, etc. But what I'm really focusing on in terms of talking about measuring environmental peace building are on these last two indicators, which are our last two types of environmental peace building, which are good environmental governance as a tool of conflict prevention and peace dimensions of sustainable development. And so that's where we're focusing our effort in terms of how to better measure the impact of environmental peace building efforts. Next. So to set the scene a bit, I wanted to talk today at a level that will help you, whether or not you're just getting into this field or whether you've been working in this field for a while. And so I'm kind of pitching this to a wide range of colleagues. And so I wanted to kind of set the scene a bit, which is we are trying at the World Bank to use a lot of existing indicators and data sets, because in low capacity environments, it's very difficult to find baseline information and to use or create new data sets. Also, understanding the scale of your intervention, whether or not it's a community level or state level or a national level, helps you set the correct indicators. Working in fragile and conflict environments requires a willingness to think differently about M&E, because your project context is not a stable one. And therefore, and you may be influencing your project context. And so you really do need to explore that boundary. I just wanted to also say that, M&E can be an extractive process where we go in, we try to create data, and then we take it away, and basically putting additional burdens on our beneficiaries. And so to the extent that we can change that dynamic, it really can contribute quite a bit to the overall impact of our work. Next. So in terms of conflict sensitive programming, I wanted to talk about three different entry points. One is kind of the structural or the background or macro context to the work we may be doing. Another is local context to the work that we may be doing. And thirdly, the interaction of our project with the immediate world around it. Next. And so in terms of structural context, one place where we often look in order to set the context for our work is in the World Bank Worldwide Governance Indicators. And I have always put the source of these slides at the bottom so that you can immediately go and look more deeply into these points. And what the Worldwide Governance Indicators does is it looks at governance with respect to different areas, political stability, citizen voice, rule of law, control of corruption. And it provides you for a particular country a bit of not only a snapshot of how that country is managing to exist in terms of good governance indicators versus other countries, but also how it is trending in these indicators across time. And so that will often produce a sense of where or what exactly the source or the root cause of fragility or conflict is. Next. I just wanted to provide you other existing data sets so that you don't have to go looking for them, but these are other data sets that we often look at and we try to draw from according to the content of our project so that we can begin with contextual indicators that we don't have to spend time recreating. Next. So then we go and we basically try to provide some local context in terms of the project and its intervention, in terms of what it's trying to do, in terms of economic impact, and how that economic impact is intersecting with economic security. So I've given you examples here, and I won't read through the examples, but it's not enough that a health center be built and staffed, but that the health center is able to remain open and it is safe to visit. Because indeed, there are health centers in South Sudan where the staff have left due to insecurity, or it is unsafe to visit because there is violence around the health centers due to perceived differential access to the center, just for example. You can also find everyday peace indicators with respect to social cohesion, routine social practices, leadership, and can you flip, Ella? Security, human rights, freedom of speech, and transitional justice. And so I urge you to go to the source, Everyday Peace Indicators. And what the Everyday Peace Indicators codebook does for you is it is able to provide you with a list of potential indicators that you might want to bring in and use for any project you're doing so that you're not, again, recreating the wheel, but you're saying, okay, it's important that my project understand how, let's say, aid is being distributed fairly based on religion or ethnicity in this particular area. Next. So the third kind of classification of indicator I wanted to talk about are project-specific interactions, which are how the project activities affect the environment that they're being implemented in. And this is where we get to talking about unintended impacts. And so what unintended impacts might our project have, either positively or negatively? And how can we begin to measure this two-way interaction between the project and its immediate target area in terms of unintended impacts? So I've given you a couple of different sources to read more about this. Next. And I wanted to just provide with you a simple case study that I found in this UNDP manual on conflict sensitivity for indicators for local and community development programming in Myanmar. And I simplified what was an already simple case study there, which is that there is a project that's providing agricultural inputs to IDPs that are returning to their village of origin. And yet the host communities who did not leave are unhappy with these IDPs because they feel as though the households are an additional burden and that perhaps the IDPs are receiving preferential access to inputs. So you might want to set or find a context indicator like the number of local level disputes over natural resources. Perhaps that's access to seeds or over land, and then find the interaction point and maybe an interaction indicator. So this is an excellent publication to look into further in order to set up. And this interaction point is in and of itself a theory of change, which is if the returnees receive assistance exclusively and assistance isn't provided to the villages of origin, it could impact the context and increase hostility of host communities, and the project itself can be impacted. Next. So I just wanted to tell you, our roadmap is, if you will, is in progress. What we are doing is we are building on our original work defueling conflict, and we're really getting into how to embed conflict sensitivity into project design and implementation. This is, if you go to defueling conflict, what you will find in the document. Next. And so we're extending the treatment of defueling conflict to look at clarity of interventions with respect to theories of change and indicators. And here we're working very closely with Carl and Amanda and team on typologies of theories of change for environmental peace building. We are looking at pilots and working with projects in Central Asia and Burkina Faso and Yemen and a few other places for understanding outcomes related to environmental peace building. And we'll be sharing those pilots and continuing to embed conflict sensitivity into World Bank operations. Next. So that is an introduction. I'm certainly here to answer questions. This is a work in progress, and it is indeed work that is very much drawing from experiences of our colleagues and friends, including Gita and Daniel that you'll hear from, including Carl and Amanda who have spoken, and including several in the audience today with Nora from Conservation International. So back to you, Carl. Do I understand that that we're not hearing Carl?
Yeah, Carl, we're not hearing you.
So what I will do is, in the absence of Carl being able to speak, I will ask you.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Excellent. Why don't we?
It's wonderful having a virtual conference where we have a room to be.
Why don't I suggest, Gita, that you go ahead and start. And while Carl and Amanda are working out this, and we'd love to hear from you, either your perspective on what has been said thus far, or bring in your own experiences from your work. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Amanda and Tracy, for these very helpful presentations. And I think both the toolkit and the roadmap are really timely, and I think would be very welcome by practitioners working in such countries. So I'm from the Global Environment Facility from the Independent Evaluation Office, and we recently did an evaluation of Jeff's work in these contexts. And majority of the Jeff projects are in FCB countries. I don't know how many of you know, but Jeff is a financial mechanism for several environmental conventions, including climate change, biodiversity. And Jeff's invested more than $4 billion in these countries. So I think that this toolkit and roadmap would provide very good guidance on specific areas of challenges that we noticed in the context of the evaluation. For example, the discussion on context. We definitely felt that projects needed to give more explanation about the context. It's important to start, and it all starts with context, because the objectives need to be set realistically. And I know we've talked about theory of change, but the objectives come first, and they need to be set realistically in relation to the context. The targets for indicators, and you've mentioned this, they need to be realistic too. We asked the question whether you can set the same targets in FCB situations as in non-FCB situations. There's also not always a consistent approach to identifying risks, for example, including a clear set of assumptions in the documents at the very start of these projects. Now, in addition to project documents stating this, M&E also needs to be therefore tailored to the specific country context. The M&E also needs to keep in mind the political, social, economic, and the security of the environment. Another point I wanted to state, which these toolkits will be very useful in, is on the issue of the indicators. And often we rely on the traditional outcome indicators, right? Reduction in deforestation, or reduction in degraded lands, etc. But in FCB situations, and I think Amanda pointed out to qualitative information as well, I think process indicators are as important as some of these other hard outcome indicators, because it takes a long time. And in such situations, I think even just changes in processes and as well as in behavior are a huge step in the right direction. So you need a combination of qualitative and quantitative indicators. And of course, as Tracy pointed out, the M&E is very different in such contexts. As in the case of projects, the M&E, and I think this could be, I don't know if it's included in the toolkit at this stage, but it needs to be participatory, involving all stakeholders to build trust and cooperation, even in the monitoring and evaluation process. Flexibility, we ask projects to adapt. I think M&E plans also need to be adaptable and responsive to the changes in context. Amanda talked a lot about being learning oriented. The monitoring and evaluation needs to be focused on being learning oriented and finding a way to actually channel useful lessons back so that these practitioners can actually take them into consideration when designing the next project. So Amanda used the term action-oriented. How do we ensure that these are actually action-oriented? And I think one thing that we've been practicing, and I'll come back to that in the next round, is given the challenges to data collection in these contexts, I think we've got to think of more innovative ways of collecting in these indicators. Digital surveys, satellite data. I know people sometimes wonder whether drones can be used, but we have used them in our work, and I can talk about that later, as well as ground sensors for a lot of data collection. This will ensure safety, which is a big issue in these environments, transparency, as well as bridge some of the data gaps. So I'll stop with that now, and maybe in the next round talk about some of the tools that we've used at the Jeff to actually monitor and evaluate in such contexts. Thanks so much, Tracy.
Great, so I think it's on me to jump in now, but Carl, I believe you were just testing your mic. Do you want to give it a quick shot to see if we can turn back to you after? Okay, we're still muted. I'm going to keep on going. And I really want to thank the presenters and Carl for putting this together, and for Gita for your comments just now, and a lot of which I agree with. I think these tools are particularly well timed. As Carl referenced at the top of his comments, we're sort of at an interesting point in the environmental peace building field where we're really moving away from admiring the problem and starting to scratch the surface of what our playbook might look like. And I think that underscores the fact that learning is really not an option at this point, that fundamentally what we're doing is, for lack of a better term, experimenting to understand what works, where, why, and how. And having grounded and thoughtful toolkits that underscore how that monitoring, evaluation, and learning happen is just like, it's just a critical part of the process, and just incredibly well timed, and really appreciate the thought and effort that's gone into both of those tools that have been presented today. And I want to pick up on a few specific points. Tracy underscored the fact that even if we are sort of a newer field, we're building on the shoulders of two very established fields of practice. And that there are many existing indicators that we are able to use and able to draw upon. And I think the closer we get to the ground, or the closer one gets to the ground, the more these issues are not disparate causal questions, but they are interacting, driving, climate change and environmental change affecting conflict, and conflict and environmental change affecting vulnerability to conflict. So thinking about how we can leverage the existing indicators, whether that's about land rights, whether that's about water access, whether that's about education. I think thinking really hard about where those fit into a programmatic strategy is just an enormously important point. And I also want to pick up on something Amanda said about monitoring, that these are dynamic systems. Conflict dynamics change, environmental systems change, and that will fundamentally affect how programs are developed and implemented. And having built-in structures to consistently monitor and allow us to identify X factors or changes. And we can think about right now, as we shift from a La Nina system into an El Nino, how that may affect programmatic questions is of critical importance. And I also want to pick up on the fact of what Amanda was referencing in regards to conflict sensitivity. Returning to Carl's point at the top, this is a new field. We are a growing and quickly learning, thanks in part to a lot of the folks on this call, and to Carl's leadership in the Environmental Peacebuilding Association. It's quickly growing, but we do need a degree of humility about what our programs are able to do and how they affect broader social systems that we are intervening upon. So if we are coming into really complicated scenarios, and by the very nature of the fact that we have systems where environment and conflict are affecting each other, it is a very clear body of evidence that that is a deeply complicated system. So utilizing monitoring for conflict sensitivity in that regard becomes of central import to how we understand the impacts of our program and ensuring that we are not causing new problems, and that we are coming in being as sensitive as possible. And the final point I want to add is the need to think about, A, the fact that we don't have any counterfactuals, that understanding impact is always going to be a challenge, and the need to be flexible with indicators, whether those are process indicators or otherwise. And those, as Tracy pointed out quite clearly, are going to be entirely dependent on context. And that as certainly as where I sit at USAID starts emphasizing localization more and more, and I think as development rightfully turns to that mode, understanding how individuals interact with systems of conflict and systems of the environment, and really starting there as we develop process indicators, I think is centrally important. So I want to thank Amanda and Carl and Tracy for all the work that you've done in this, because I think in developing and implementing new programs, these are invaluable resources to begin the really complicated and difficult work of putting in place monitoring and evaluation systems. So back over to you, Carl, and hopefully we have audio.
Is my microphone working?
You're loud and clear.
Can you hear me on the microphone?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah.
That's working. Excellent, thank you. So I want to follow on, actually, one of the chats exchange with Nikas Bahar, who I'm leading a direction that I wanted to go, which is, are there other tools that people would like to share? There's an OTI, monitoring, evaluation, and learning tool that Bahar has put in the chat. Wondering, Daniel or Tracy or Geeta, are there other tools that you would commend to people's attention in terms of resources here?
I can jump in quickly, and then I'll turn it to Geeta. And I'll note too that my colleagues, Marzia and Rick, are online, who sit in our analysis and evidence team and are true whizzes who eat, sleep, and drink monitoring and evaluation. So they might feel free to put things in the link, but I'm going to plug two. As I see it, especially as it relates to climate change, these issues are going to manifest primarily as changes in water and changes in land-related resources. And USAID has recently revised and re-released its Land and Conflict Toolkit, which does have a monitoring and evaluation component, and its Water and Conflict Toolkit, which Carl assisted in. And that too has a monitoring and evaluation component. So if we start thinking about these systems in slightly more specific ways, and I'll post the chats, the links rather, I think these are two really useful resources. And then over to you, Geeta.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. And I think being an evaluator and coming from the evaluation standpoint, I think one way of promoting learning is not exclusively through the projects, but I think also thematic evaluations actually help if you're not exclusively making them accountable. or staff accountable through these evaluations. I think they have a tremendous learning potential. And I want to point out to the recent evaluation that Carl's team did with us at the Jeff, because it raised a lot of awareness. First is we realized data limitations, that there was not enough data being collected. So we have been using quite a bit of geospatial analysis and geospatial data, which actually helped map the risks in real time in these countries that we analyzed. They also help in actually tracking and monitoring changes in natural and physical environment, right? And so it comes to some of these outcome indicators, degradation, destruction, but it kind of gives you a long time horizon, which is often missing in terms of monitoring data. But I think what was useful was that the task managers are often not knowledgeable about what happens on the extent to which their projects are actually impacted by just virtue of operating in these environments. Impacts on cancellation, impacts on outcomes, longer term sustainability. It also actually highlighted the interesting pathways, which they hadn't really understood earlier, of how fragility and conflict have affected project performance, be it through physical insecurity, social conflict, or what the real drivers are. So shedding light on this was very useful and valuable for them. And finally, they learned from their peers and others, and this was learning for us through as we were doing the study, on what are some of the strategies that teams can actually use to manage risks. And I think Tracy alluded to this in the bank's work that's being done right now, is what can they do to manage risks posed by conflict? In the case of the Jeff, we saw just avoidance of those situations in some case, or mitigation through partnering with good local organizations, which also actually promotes longer term sustainability of Jeff interventions. Adaptive management, or using peace building, whether it's through cooperation or confidence building. So learning, and then we did find that projects were actually learning from both their own experiences and from other programming. So I think the learning dimension can be brought in through evaluation, and it's not merely always through the accountability angle, but also from just sharing these kinds of lessons. And we found that in the end, it was pretty influential because as a response to this, the Jeff is actually developing a guidance for programming in such situations. So task managers found it useful. So I think both these toolkits would add to this and be a valuable resource to all of us, whether it's in the evaluation space or it's for practitioners. I think this would be really helpful and timely. And last, on Daniel's point on looking at this through a systems lens, and this is something that we've started doing a lot of, is integrating environment with the socio, the economic dimensions, as well as now the fragility dimensions. To taking a systems lens to the issue is really critical. Thanks a lot.
I'm curious, before we move on to the next topic, Tracy or Amanda, would you like to follow up on anything that has been said?
Amanda?
Go ahead, Tracy.
I was offering up Amanda to go first. I mean, we've been having an interesting discussion in the chat about tools and recommending tools, of which Daniel started recommending the USAID series on land and conflict, water and conflict, some of which of these are being reissued, if I understand correctly, and they are as timely now as they were when they were originally issued. Also, there are quite a number of good practice toolkits and sources that I've embedded in my PowerPoint, which I'm happy to send a copy to if anyone wants to receive the PowerPoint directly. Over to you.
So I wanted to follow up on a point that Geeta raised about taking a systems approach. And I don't know if it's my own little brain and the problems associated with that, but it's like, it's hard enough to talk about environment and conflict, or environment and peace. When you start talking about other dimensions like environment, gender, and conflict, environment, youth, and conflict, it gets hard to tell the story because often it's very easy to kind of connect these two factors and those two factors. But how do you? I'm just wondering from a systems perspective, if people have any thoughts about how do you integrate analysis and thinking across these multiple dimensions simultaneously?
I'm going to quickly comment and actually take a little bit of a page out of Tracy's book here, because it literally is coming out of the toolkit that you put together, or the guidance document that you put together. I think part of the question becomes, how do we think about disparate sectors and the indicators used in different sectors to understand how these issues come together? So I think part of our responsibility in developing and designing programs is thinking about how we can justify how supporting local justice systems might limit the effects of environmental change on conflict. And thinking through where those connections are made becomes a very important window for the practicalities of programmatic intervention. But I also think from the perspective of bringing a systems view that connects, again, justice systems into fundamentally how people are dealing with changing land use and land resource access.
I mean, if I can just jump in, maybe Carl, I share a bit of your difficulty to wrap my head around the complexity of a systems approach. Most time for a project, we have a project development objective, which really says, are we intending to expand acreage? Are we intending to expand crop yield? Are we intending to expand water efficiency? Are we intending to expand nutritional outcomes, et cetera, et cetera? And usually there is, if we can be as specific as possible about what the primary intended outcome is, then we differentiate into that supporting outcomes that can help deliver on that primary outcome. I maintain that looking at that a systems approach is a variation at looking at unintended consequences, whether those unintended consequences are positive or negative. That you might have positive unintended consequences that contribute to what one would be calling a systems approach, which back when I was working on Jeff projects, we called kind of catalytic indicators or catalytic impacts, which were impacts that were perhaps not anticipated originally, but which came about due to the project intervention. So this is how I begin to conceptualize a systems approach. I think we're not getting it right yet in terms of just the nuts and bolts of M&E and M&E, which integrates conflict sensitivity. And so I am reticent to dive into a systems approach to conflict sensitivity if we don't know how to do it in terms of A plus B equals C, to put it briefly. Over.
Can you hear me? Great, finally. Tracy, it was very interesting. Yesterday, there was a whole panel on conflict sensitivity and integration, and one of the audience members said, how are we still talking about how to do this without great examples when we've been talking about conflict sensitivity for, more than a decade? And I think that's true. I think about, systems, some things that have come out for us, and I've seen systems assessments done that really just create unusable diagrams with tons of circles that it's not really applicable or accessible to doing the work. But two things that I think about are doing regular context or conflict analyses, not just doing it at the beginning and leaving it, but doing them regularly, and doing them with interdisciplinary teams. There's been a lot of discussion about that at this conference, about getting different people in the room with different specialties to think through these different approaches or perspectives on a project. The other thing that I think about a lot is getting that qualitative data to triangulate, but add more nuance to what you might be collecting quantitatively, to understand from people. And this goes back to unintended consequences and all of these other things we've talked about, but giving people the space to talk about how things are happening, what's happening, and why they think things are happening, even if that's not technically why, but that brings in different elements of the system that from where I sit or where any of us sit, we may miss in the process. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think there are small things we can do in the meantime to improve our approaches to M&E.
I'd like to encourage people, we've been monitoring the chat. If people have things that they would like to add verbally, raise your hand. I don't think there are any outstanding questions at this point, but I'm happy to give the floor if somebody would like to ask a question or share a perspective that okay, Bahar?
Hi, good morning, good evening. It's 10 p.m. in Iraq. So, and this is Bahar Al-Jamur, Monetary Evaluation Manager for Chemonix International OTI USAID project. So I've been working like 5 years right now in OTI project M&E, and I have been through like three different programs with evaluating 400 of grants plus, and doing a lot of thematic and programmatic evaluation. So I really liked the discussion, and while you guys were all discussing this, I was like, maybe there should be actually a M&E reform conference as well. So how the practitioners can advocate for changing the donor's perspective and telling them what makes the most sense. Because so many times I sit with my other USAID and non-USAID and UN projects, and they tell me about the donor requirements of indicators, which might not make the best sense, given that I'm coming with an OTI perspective that's very participatory, very real-time adaptation, and very integrated to programming. So whatever activities or let's say program we do, we monitor it, we give recommendation while we're implementing the project, and they get adapted. Even the indicators sometimes get changed based on the community perspective and the outcomes that we are achieving, other than the outcomes that we were envisioning. So it's mostly like a theory of change, a dynamic theory of change for each grant, while having like a theory of change also for the program. So also like another very critical point to M&E and dynamic M&E, because we do a MEL plan for every single activity or grant itself, other than having a one MEL plan for all the project. So a significant part of it is the adaptation, but also localization of the opinions. So how we can engage our partners and not just data collection and the discussion sessions, but also in data analysis and giving recommendation based on the context, based on the their observation on the community, based on the challenges that they face. So it can be like more realistic while we are even strategically adapting. For that also, we do like continuous discussion for our thematic evaluation. For example, we do education sector activities, but what are the outcome of education sector? Is it just students get better education, or it's more community solidarity as well? Is it more civic engagement behind it? Is it like more outreach needed in this community to feel included? So those kind of things. But I really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much. But I'm also happy to describe any sort of OTI because it's a very innovative system. We create our own tools. Sometimes it's not every set tool that can be applicable. And we also adapt the evaluation methods to our own way of programming. So, but I'm very glad that so many of you are talking about those changes, and happy to discuss if anyone wanted about those kind of things, because I have been working in this field also for 5 years now. And thank you.
Thank you, Bahar. Still working this out here, but thank you, Bahar. And we have a few minutes if either the panelists or somebody in the audience would like to share a few thoughts. I do have other questions, but I want to give people a chance to talk.
Yeah, I'll just share a brief observation, which is that we've been trying to spend a bit of time looking at how to separate or differentiate good governance indicators from work that's been done on democracy. And in recognition of the fact that some of our clients are not wedded to necessarily democratic outcomes, and that we're trying not to impose a Western institutional framework on them. And so that's just one area where trying to kind of differentiate and be able to figure out how to decontextualize what might seem as democratic or human rights outcomes for some are perceived as being exogenous and paternalistic for others, just to be very clear. So anyone who's working on that, I'd be happy to connect with and hear how you're trying to kind of differentiate these strands of what might be perceived as good governance over.
I'm curious if what sorts of approaches people have for thinking the various quantitative data that are often collected. So if there are improvements in achievements in reforestation, how do you link those environmental improvements to changes in the peace and conflict scenario? Is there, are there, I'm thinking other than narratives. Narrative is an easy way. We trust one another more because of this, and you can have surveys and you can get some measure of quantitative aspects there. But I'm wondering, are there, aside from narratives or interviews, what other ways of connecting environmental change and peace and conflict change do people have?
I mean, if I can just jump in, I think it's not really easy to do with integrity, let's say with data integrity at the level of a project intervention, of of a funded project intervention or with an intervention or program that only has a span of 3 to 5 to 10 years. I do think that if you're looking at nationwide government programs that have been in existence perhaps through a time span of pre-conflict to conflict to post-conflict, and in any two of those areas, you can certainly begin to test that hypothesis. And that's where I see that we have come the closest to looking at causality and correlation. But at the level of a particular project, I think the best we're doing so far is being able to identify and measure unintended consequences as a kind of an early warning approach. And unintended consequences is a very mild sub-indicator, let's say, of what might be correlation or causality between environmental outcomes and conflict reduction outcomes. Over.
Thank you, Tracy. I think it is very interesting because a lot of one thing I would also highlight is that we've seen a number of instances where unintended impacts may also be positive. And so I think, we often look for unintended impacts as just what are the problems we didn't plan for and how do we improve? But sometimes there are positive unintended impacts that we want to replicate or build on. I would also highlight the fact, we haven't talked much about it, but a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is leading to evaluation. One of the other aspects I think is really important for monitoring is early warning, especially in a lot of the places that we're talking about. And that's a slightly different set of parameters and actions that flow from that. I do want to thank everyone for sharing their perspectives, both in the chat and in the group. And we are coming up on the end of the session. I'd like to thank AFP for this opportunity to have this discussion, and thank the panelists for sharing their expertise and experience. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Feel free to continue this through emails. My email box is open. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.